The envelope looked like junk mail until I saw the two words that did not belong in my mailbox. Home equity. I had one grocery bag cutting into my fingers and another wedged against my hip. I was thinking about dinner and the weekly production meeting I was supposed to run the next morning. Then my brain caught up to what my eyes had already read, and the hallway around me seemed to tilt. Home equity meant my house. Application meant somebody had asked a lender to put a new debt on it. I had not asked. I set the groceries on the counter and opened the envelope with my thumb, slow and careful, like the paper might bite. Inside was a glossy letter with my name and address, a loan reference number, and a bright paragraph about next steps. It thanked me for choosing them. It listed documents they still needed: pay stubs, tax returns, homeowner's insurance. Then it listed the phone number on file. It was not mine. That single detail changed the temperature of the room. It was the same kitchen I had lived in for 12 years, the same tile under my feet, the same family calendar on the fridge, the same bowl of apples my wife kept buying even though nobody ate them. But in that moment, the house stopped feeling like a home and started feeling like an asset that could be taken from me by anyone who knew my social security number. My name is Miles Hartman. I am 58 years old. I have spent 3 decades managing operations in logistics, which is a polite way of saying I spend my days preventing small mistakes from turning into expensive disasters. I trace missing shipments. I build checklists and redundancies. I train people to slow down when they want to rush. I never imagined I would need redundancies at home. My wife Jenna was 50. We had been married 22 years. We had 2 kids, Ava, 16, and Lucas, 11. We were not glamorous, but we were stable. A house in a quiet neighborhood outside Denver. A mortgage we refinanced when rates were low. A savings account that grew slowly. A life that looked ordinary from the outside. I had built ordinary on purpose, because I grew up in a house where money was either a scream or a secret. My father could work 60 hours a week and still be late on rent, and my mother could smile at church while calculating which bill to ignore. When I left home, I promised myself my children would never hear adults whispering in the kitchen after midnight. I promised myself debt would never sneak up on us. So when that letter said someone had applied for home equity, my first feeling was not rage. It was something colder. Betrayal. I read the letter again. Loan reference number, a link to upload documents, a deadline, a friendly reminder that the interest rate could change if I delayed. It was all designed to move fast, to keep momentum, to make a person cooperate before they had time to think. I flipped the letter over and scanned the fine print. There was a disclaimer that the notice could be sent to the mailing address on the application, even if someone else had initiated it. Someone else. I went to my laptop and pulled up my credit monitoring dashboard. I had signed up years ago after a coworker got his identity stolen. I rarely checked it because it rarely changed. That was the luxury of stability. You stop watching. Now I watched. There was an alert from 2 days earlier that I had dismissed as routine noise. A new inquiry. A hard inquiry from a lender I did not recognize. My stomach tightened. I clicked for details. Date. Time. Amount range. Not final, but real enough to leave a mark. The inquiry was for a home equity line of credit. A HELOC. That meant someone was trying to put a tap on my house, like a hose they could turn on whenever they wanted. I sat down at the kitchen table and forced myself to breathe. I knew what panic did to decision-making. I had seen it in warehouses when something went wrong and supervisors started making loud choices just to feel useful. Panic created motion without direction. I needed direction. I grabbed a legal pad and wrote a simple list. Verify, contain, document. Verify meant calling the lender. Contain meant freezing anything that could be used against me. Document meant making sure nobody could later rewrite what happened. I called the lender's customer service line using the number on their official website, not the number on the letter. I refused to let the letter be my guide. An automated system asked for the loan reference number. I entered it. It asked for the last 4 digits of my social security number. I hesitated, then complied, because I needed facts. After 10 minutes of hold music that sounded like a fake smile, a representative reviewed the file. The application was active under review, waiting for documents. The contact information on file included an email address I did not recognize and a phone number that was not mine. The application had been started online. Identification had been uploaded. My driver's license. My world narrowed to a single point. Someone had a copy of my license. Someone had used it. My mind searched for the simplest explanation that fit the facts. There were only 2 categories of people who could have done this: a stranger with stolen data, or someone inside my life, someone with access to my wallet, my mail, my files. I looked at the hallway where Jenna's purse usually sat. I looked at the home office door. I thought about the family filing cabinet in the laundry room that held tax returns and insurance policies, the places a spouse can access without it feeling like access. Strangers steal identities for cash, but they do not use your own house address for mail unless they are confident they can intercept it. They hide, they redirect, they avoid attention. This application used my address because whoever filed it was comfortable with my mail, comfortable like family. I ended the call politely, because politeness is a reflex when you are trying not to scream. Then I did the first containment step. I froze my credit with all 3 bureaus. I did it online, methodically, 1 login at a time, 1 confirmation at a time. I saved screenshots of every page. Then I called the lender again and asked for their fraud department. I reported the application as unauthorized. I requested immediate cancellation. I insisted they note the file so nothing could proceed without my in-person verification and updated ID. They gave me a case number and a timeline. I did not care about their timeline. I cared about stopping the momentum. I requested written confirmation that the application had been flagged. They agreed. I closed my laptop and sat there for a minute, listening to the refrigerator hum. This was not yet about my marriage. This was about my house, and the fact that my trust had become an instrument someone else could use. Jenna came home at 4:30, the usual time. I heard her keys, the garage door, her footsteps on tile. She moved through the kitchen like the ground under her feet would always hold. I watched her without speaking for a moment. She set her purse down. She glanced at the groceries. She moved toward the stove as if dinner was the only decision that mattered. I placed the letter on the table where she could not avoid it. Her eyes dropped to the header. She blinked once, slow. Then she looked up. I had seen many faces in my career when something goes wrong. People have a limited set of reactions to exposure: confusion, anger, denial, bargaining. Jenna's first reaction was not confusion, it was calculation. Her hand hovered near the letter but did not touch it, like the paper was hot. Her eyes shifted toward my laptop. Her posture changed into the stance she used when she wanted to control a room. She tried to shrink the problem. She tried to turn it into a misunderstanding. She tried to make my alarm feel like overreaction. I let the performance run out of air. Then I asked the only thing that mattered: whether she had filed the application. Her denial came too quickly, too clean, too practiced. I asked how the lender had my driver's license. Her gaze flicked toward the hallway. That flick was a confession without words. She pivoted. She made it about trust. She made it about my tone. She made it about how hard her life had been recently. She made it about being invisible in our marriage. Jenna was talented at turning a question into a weather system. I did not fight the weather. I returned to the ground. I asked again whether she had filed the application. Her shoulders dropped, not in guilt, in fatigue. She admitted she had started it. Not finished it, she insisted. Started it. It was a tiny distinction that mattered only to a person trying to feel less guilty. She framed it as preparation, a safety net, a backup plan in case something happened. I asked why the email on file was not mine. She hesitated. I asked why the phone number on file was not mine. She hesitated again. Hesitation is where truth lives. She admitted she used a separate email and a separate number because she did not want me to see notifications. She did not want me to ask questions. She wanted time to fix it before I ever knew it existed. That was the moment the betrayal moved from financial to personal. If Jenna had been panicking, she could have come to me. She could have admitted trouble. She could have asked for help. Anger would have happened, but anger is survivable. Secrecy was different. Secrecy was a choice. I asked what she needed the money for. She tried to answer vaguely. Expenses, emergencies, catching up. That did not match our life. Our bills were paid. Our mortgage was current. Our cars were not new, but they ran. We did not live on the edge. So I asked again, slower, with less room for fog. Jenna's eyes went wet, not because she was sorry, but because she was losing control of the story. She confessed she had been sending money to her brother, Tate. Jenna's brother had always been a walking crisis, charming, funny, chronically broke. 2 kids with 2 different women and a talent for turning consequences into someone else's responsibility. He had shown up at our house more than once with a duffel bag and a sad story, and left with cash and a promise he never kept. I had stopped giving him money years ago. Jenna never stopped, not fully. She told me Tate had gotten into trouble that did not respond to jokes. The kind of trouble that involved threats, deadlines, and someone who wanted cash immediately. She told me she tried to handle it quietly. She told me she thought she could fix it before I ever needed to know. She told me she hated disappointing me more than she feared the risk. I listened, and the part of me that still loved her wanted to believe it was misguided loyalty. Then I asked the question that turns fog into numbers. How much? Jenna did not answer right away. The silence stretched until it became its own answer. Finally, she gave a number that made my stomach drop. 32,000. Over 18 months. Not in one dramatic transfer, in dozens of small ones. The kind that blend into groceries and school fees if you are not looking. The kind that make theft look like life. 32,000 did not come from nowhere. It came from our system. It came from savings and budget padding and quiet gaps. And when the gaps got too big, she looked for a tap. My house. I asked whether Tate knew she was applying for the HELOC. Jenna's eyes shifted again. That shift was enough. I did not need a full confession to understand. Someone had pushed her. Someone had taught her that secrecy was a solution. I asked for the phone number she used for notifications. Jenna gave it to me. It was not a random number. It was a secondary line under Tate's name on our shared family plan. A line I did not even realize existed. My chest tightened. A hidden line used for hidden debt. I asked for the email address. She gave it too. A new email created 9 months earlier, named like a marketing handle. The kind of name that sounded upbeat and harmless. I searched our household inbox for any forward history to that address. The results filled the screen. Receipts, transfers, digital confirmations, screenshots of payment app transactions forwarded to the secret email. Jenna had built a parallel life of paperwork, and the scariest part was how organized it was. People assume fraud looks messy. Real fraud looks neat. That night I did not yell. I did not throw things. I did not threaten. I did something more frightening to Jenna. I got quiet. I moved through the house and gathered documents like a man preparing for a storm. Tax returns, insurance policies, mortgage statements, deeds, titles, social security cards, birth certificates. I put them in a locking file box and moved it into my office. Then I changed the lock on my office door. Then I changed every password on every financial account and turned on two-factor authentication using my phone only. Jenna watched me do it with the wide eyes of someone realizing the world she relied on was being rebuilt without her. It was not punishment. It was containment. The next morning, I took the day off work. I drove to my bank and met with a manager. I described the unauthorized loan application and asked for additional security flags on my accounts. The manager nodded like he had heard it before, which made my stomach sink in a different way. This was common enough to be routine. I asked about property fraud alerts and title monitoring. He explained the county process and recommended a service that watched for filings. I signed up. Then I went to the county clerk's office and filed for a property fraud alert. I made sure any new lien or deed change would trigger notification. I kept thinking about the word lien, a quiet word, a legal word, a word that can make a home stop being yours without anyone breaking a window. On my way home, I called an attorney. Her name was Kendra Blythe. She specialized in family law and financial misconduct. I met her the next day because waiting felt like leaving my front door unlocked. In Kendra's office, I laid out the timeline. The letter, the inquiry, the lender's confirmation that my license had been uploaded, Jenna's admission about the secret email and secret phone line, the money sent to Tate. Kendra did not flinch. She asked one question that cut through everything: whether I planned to stay married. I stared at the wall for a moment. I had not allowed myself to think beyond the immediate crisis. My first instinct was to protect the kids from upheaval. My second instinct was to protect us from further damage. Those instincts did not always align. I gave the truth. I did not know. Kendra explained options: legal separation with emergency financial orders, an agreement that prevented new debt, required disclosure, and set enforceable boundaries quickly. Divorce was possible too, but slower. Separation could be immediate and protective. She also explained the part nobody wants to hear. When a spouse commits financial misconduct, institutions can treat it as complicated. Marriage creates assumptions. Fraud departments love assumptions. Kendra told me to document everything and file a police report so the paper trail would exist outside our home. That evening, I sat down with Ava and Lucas and did the hardest thing I have ever done as a father. I told them we were dealing with a serious financial problem. I told them the house was safe. I told them I was handling it. I did not give them adult details because children should not become forensic accountants for their parents. But Ava was 16. She read tension like a weather forecast. She needed more than vague reassurance. She wanted to know whether her mother had done something wrong. I told her the truth in the least damaging form I could manage. Mom had made decisions without telling me, and those decisions could have harmed our home. That was why boundaries were being set. Lucas looked scared and asked whether we would have to move. I told him no. Not because I had a guarantee, but because he needed stability more than he needed my full anxiety. After they went to their rooms, I stared at the family calendar on the fridge. Soccer practice, a dentist appointment, a school fundraiser, ordinary ink marks in a life that suddenly felt like it was balancing on a needle. 2 days later, the lender's fraud department confirmed the HELOC application had been canceled. Relief washed through me, but it was not the relief I expected. It did not feel like victory. It felt like delaying a fall, because the application had been canceled only after I noticed. If I had been less attentive, if the letter had looked more like junk mail, if I had been distracted, the HELOC could have been approved. Funds could have been drawn. A lien could have appeared on my title like a bruise. I told myself I was lucky. Then I realized something I hated admitting. Luck had nothing to do with it. This was how close you can come to losing a home without ever missing a mortgage payment. A week later, I discovered how far the contamination had spread. My phone buzzed with an alert from the property monitoring service. A document had been recorded. My heart stopped for a second. I clicked the alert. It was not a HELOC lien. It was a notice of intent to file a mechanic's lien. Mechanic's lien meant someone claimed they had done work on my property and had not been paid. I had not hired anyone to do work. I drove home like my job was on fire. Jenna was in the kitchen, hands shaking as she poured water and spilled half of it. She had already seen the notice. Her face looked like someone who had run out of lies. The notice listed a contracting company. I recognized the name from a Thanksgiving story Tate had told, bragging about a friend's business. The notice claimed materials were delivered for a bathroom remodel, and $14,000 was owed. My house did not have a new bathroom, but paperwork did not care about reality until you forced it to. I called the number on the notice and requested proof. Permits, delivery tickets, photos, any evidence work was done. The response was defensive, the tone of someone used to people paying out of fear. They emailed an invoice. It included my address, a signature that looked like my name in sloppy cursive, and a date. It was a forgery. Crude, but on letterhead. And letterhead can move systems. I forwarded everything to Kendra. Then I called the county clerk and learned the notice was not a filed lien yet, but a step. If ignored, a lien could appear later, clouding my title and complicating refinancing and sale. The fraud had grown tentacles. It was not just the HELOC attempt. It was my property being threatened by invented debts. Kendra drafted a formal response and demanded evidence, copying the county recorder and the contractor's insurer. We also filed a police report for forgery and identity theft. I did not want police in my marriage, but police were already in my marriage. They just were not wearing uniforms. At the police station, I explained how someone had used my identity to initiate a HELOC application and how someone had forged my signature on an invoice to threaten my title. The officer asked whether I knew who did it. I told him I suspected my brother-in-law, but proof was still forming. He asked whether my wife was involved. I could not lie. I described what Jenna admitted and what she claimed she did not do. I left with a report number. Report numbers do not heal marriages. They do make banks and courts pay attention. The next day, the contractor withdrew the notice of intent. No apology, no admission, just retreat. Retreat is what happens when people realize their target is not passive. But retreat did not make me feel safe. It made me feel aware of how many doors Tate had tried to open using my name. I started auditing my life the way I audit warehouses. I pulled my full credit reports and scanned every account line by line. I checked my mortgage portal for any change in mailing address, phone number, email. I checked my homeowner's insurance profile and discovered the contact email had been changed 2 months earlier. Not to Jenna's primary email, to the secret one. That detail mattered more than it should have. Insurance is where you update policies. Insurance is where you request claims. Insurance is where you confirm ownership details. It was another system Jenna had moved into the shadow. I restored the email, changed the password, and added 2-factor authentication. Then I called the insurer and placed a verbal password on the account so no one could make changes without it. I checked our phone plan and found 2 lines I did not recognize. The secondary line Jenna used for the HELOC notifications and another prepaid line billed under our family account. I canceled both. I checked our joint savings account and found transfers labeled with neutral words: household, reimburse, supplies. All going to one destination: Tate. Jenna did not send them from our bank website. She used payment apps, the kind that normalize sending money, the kind that make debt feel like a casual favor. She had been feeding him in quiet increments. I printed the statements and added them to the locking file box. Jenna watched me do it, shame radiating off her like heat. Shame would have mattered earlier. Now I needed structure. Kendra filed for temporary financial orders. The court granted them quickly. No new debt in either of our names without mutual written consent. No new loans against the property. Full disclosure of any accounts. And a requirement that Jenna stop transferring money to Tate from any shared funds. The paper did not repair my marriage, but it did something more important. It created consequences. For the first time, Jenna could not soothe herself with the belief that everything would be fine if she handled it quietly. Quiet handling had nearly cost us our home. In early June, Ava came downstairs while Jenna and I were sorting paperwork at the table. She looked at the documents and asked what was happening, not with curiosity, but with the exhausted steadiness of a teenager who has learned that adults are fallible. I explained safeguards and boundaries. I told her our family had been targeted by someone who used trust as a tool. Ava asked whether it was Uncle Tate. I nodded. Ava told me Tate had approached her months earlier for money, framing it as a secret, describing it as a maturity test. She refused, but she never told me because she did not want to cause drama. Drama is the word predators use as cover. They teach you that naming the problem is worse than the problem. I thanked Ava for telling me now. I promised her she did the right thing. Then I went outside and sat on the porch for a long time, listening to sprinklers and lawnmowers, trying to calm the anger that wanted to burn my insides. Tate had reached for my daughter. That meant the threat was not only financial, it was relational. It was recruitment into secrecy. That evening I banned Tate from my property. I told Jenna that if Tate appeared at our house again, I would call the police. Jenna cried. She tried to frame it as family loyalty. She tried to frame it as compassion. Compassion is beautiful when used to protect the vulnerable. It is a weapon when used to protect the harmful. I told Jenna the truth. Her brother had become a danger to our home and our children. For the first time, Jenna did not argue. She was finally seeing the shape of what she had been enabling. In July, Tate escalated in a way I did not anticipate. He filed a complaint with my employer's HR department. He claimed I was financially abusive. He claimed I controlled Jenna's access to money and used legal threats to isolate her. He wrote it like a script designed for outrage, the kind of script that people believe because it fits their appetite for villains. My HR director called me into a meeting and asked whether there was any truth to it. I walked in with documentation. The HELOC letter, the inquiry record, the lender fraud confirmation, the police report number, the temporary financial orders, the mechanic's lien notice and withdrawal, the transfer history to Tate. I did not argue. I did not plead. I laid out facts. The complaint was dismissed. Tate's attempt to smear me created something he did not expect. A paper trail outside my home. Paper trails are kryptonite to liars. By August, the immediate crisis had stabilized. My credit was frozen. The HELOC application was dead. The lien threat was gone. Our accounts were secured. The court orders were in place. But my marriage was not repaired. Repair requires trust. Trust requires honesty. Honesty requires a person to choose truth over comfort. Jenna tried. She attended counseling. She shared passwords. She gave me full access to her email and phone plan. She agreed to a strict budget. She cut Tate off completely. I watched her efforts the way I watch a new process in a warehouse. You do not assume it works because someone promises. You watch it over time. I could see Jenna's regret. I could see her exhaustion. I could see that she had been pulled by guilt and fear for most of her life. Guilt for being the stable sibling while Tate spiraled. Fear of being judged if she admitted she could not fix him. Shame made her secretive. Secretive behavior made her dangerous. That is the loop people do not talk about. In September, a final twist arrived in the form of a thin official letter from the county. A deed change request had been attempted online and blocked due to the fraud alert. Attempted. Not completed, but attempted. The request had been filed under the name of a property services company I had never heard of. When I searched the company, it led me to a mailbox address and a phone number that matched one of Tate's old contacts, buried in Jenna's phone records. It was a proxy, a mask. Tate had tried to move beyond loans and liens and into the deed itself. If I had not filed that fraud alert, if I had not been watching, someone might have altered ownership records while I was at work. I held the letter and felt something settle inside me. Not fear, clarity. Some people do not stop when you forgive them. They stop when you make it impossible to feed. I called the county and confirmed the block. I filed an additional affidavit. I upgraded monitoring. I asked Kendra about restraining orders. She advised me to wait until Tate made direct contact again, but to stay ready. I was ready. A week later, Tate was arrested on unrelated charges, forged checks, and a probation violation. I learned about it from a public record alert. Jenna learned from her mother, who cried and tried to frame it as bad luck. Bad luck is the word families use when they cannot admit a pattern. Jenna sat at the kitchen table that night for a long time, staring at her hands. She looked older than 50. She looked like someone finally understanding that love cannot rescue a person who refuses accountability. I wanted to feel triumph, but I did not. I felt grief, not just for my marriage, but for the idea of family that made Jenna vulnerable to her brother's manipulation. In October, we reached a decision. We separated, not loudly, not dramatically, on paper. Jenna moved into a small apartment nearby, close enough for the kids to see her regularly, far enough that my home no longer felt like a shared risk. We set schedules. We coordinated school drop-offs. We attended Lucas's games without sitting next to each other. We kept things civil because our children deserved adults who could behave. Ava handled it with a quiet maturity that made me proud and sad at the same time. Lucas struggled. He asked why things changed. He wanted a simple answer. I gave him a simple truth. The adults were fixing a problem, and fixing takes time. It was not a lie. It just was not the whole story. Separation did not end the consequences. It only gave me a controlled workspace to deal with them. The first consequence was my credit score. Even though the HELOC never funded, the inquiry existed. It sat there like a fingerprint. I wrote letters to the bureaus, included the fraud case number, the police report number, and the lender's cancellation confirmation. I learned that credit systems are built for inertia. They prefer whatever happened first. It took weeks of persistence and multiple rounds of documentation to remove a single line item. The second consequence was my sense of safety. I kept expecting another envelope, another alert, another attempt to reopen a door I had just nailed shut. I began checking the mail the way a person checks a window during a storm. I stopped leaving important documents in shared spaces. I stopped assuming that shared life meant shared responsibility. The third consequence was the quiet one. The way trust changes shape inside your body. I had always thought trust was something you felt toward a person. After this, I understood trust as a design choice. A house has locks not because you hate your neighbors, but because you accept reality. A financial life needs locks for the same reason. Kendra guided me through a practical cleanup process. We filed an identity theft affidavit with the Federal Trade Commission. We sent certified letters to the lender, the bureaus, the contracting company, and any institution that might later claim ignorance. We created a single timeline document listing dates, alerts, calls, and confirmations because memory is unreliable and paperwork is not. During that process, we uncovered another detail that explained how everything started. The driver's license upload had not come from a photo taken recently. It came from a scanned copy, sharp and perfectly framed, the kind you get from a home scanner. That narrowed the source to one place, our family cloud folder. Jenna admitted she scanned my license the previous winter for a school travel permission form for Lucas. She saved it in a folder labeled school, and she never thought about it again. She also admitted she gave Tate access to our family cloud years earlier to share photos of the kids. It had felt harmless then. It was not harmless now. Tate did not need to steal my wallet. He did not need to break into our home. He needed only what family often hands out without thinking: access. That realization made my stomach twist in a new way. It meant the fraud was not a single bad decision. It was the natural result of years of casual permission. It was a reminder that modern theft does not always require force. It requires familiarity. Another uncomfortable lesson arrived when I requested the lender's application audit trail through their fraud department. The trail showed the steps taken to verify identity. It included knowledge-based authentication questions, the kind that ask about old addresses, car loans, or previous employers. Those questions are meant to protect you. They only work if the person answering does not live inside your life. The audit trail showed the questions were answered correctly on the first attempt. Jenna did not have to say it out loud for me to understand what that meant. Whether she answered them herself or whether she helped Tate do it, the verification succeeded because it was someone who knew my history. The system could not distinguish between a spouse and a thief when the spouse was acting like a thief. That was a hard sentence to allow inside my head. I could forgive panic. I could forgive poor judgment. I could even forgive the impulse to rescue a brother who refused to be rescued. What I could not ignore was the conversion of my identity into a tool. In late October, we attended a court review for the temporary financial orders. I did not want to be there, but I understood the purpose. Paper is only as strong as enforcement. The judge reviewed our disclosures and confirmed the restrictions remained in place. Jenna agreed to a repayment plan for the money taken from savings, even though repayment could never restore what mattered most. The court did not fix our marriage. It did something more realistic. It fixed the boundaries. The kids lived inside those boundaries. Ava became watchful. She stopped assuming adults knew what they were doing. She checked details. She asked precise questions about money and safety. I hated what she learned from this, but I respected how she learned it. She began building her own boundaries early, which is a better inheritance than any college fund. Lucas responded differently. He became clingy in small ways. He wanted reassurance before sleep. He wanted routine. He wanted the same breakfast, the same drive to school, the same predictable weekends. I gave him predictability like it was medicine. I learned to separate my fear from his needs. I learned to measure stability in little rituals. Jenna and I learned a strange form of cooperation. We shared the same children, which meant we shared responsibility even when we no longer shared trust. We communicated through schedules and logistics. We avoided late-night conversations that used to drift into emotion, because emotion was where old patterns hid. We kept things boring on purpose. Boring became the new safety. In November, the final cleanup task was the one that felt symbolic. I removed every shared permission that did not need to exist. Tate was removed from every cloud folder. Old shared devices were wiped. Password managers were set up. Two-factor authentication was added to everything, not as a sign of paranoia, but as a sign of maturity. I also added a freeze to my property title through multiple layers. county alerts, monitoring services, and a personal routine of checking. The first time a month passed without an alert, I noticed the quiet. The second month, I began to trust the quiet. The third month, I began to believe the quiet could last. By December, the house was quiet again. Not the quiet of denial, but the quiet of systems functioning. On a cold Sunday morning, I checked my mailbox and saw only normal mail. Holiday cards, a water bill, a grocery coupon nobody would use. No loan applications. No lien threats. No surprises. I stood there for a moment and realized how close I had come to losing everything simply because I trusted the wrong person with access. Trust is not a feeling. Trust is permission, and permission without limits is an invitation to be used. I kept the HELOC letter in my locking file box, not because I wanted to relive it, but because I wanted a reminder. A reminder that the biggest dangers are not always strangers in hoodies. Sometimes they are the people who know exactly where you keep your driver's license copy. Sometimes they are the people who can watch you build a stable life and then treat that stability like a resource they can spend without asking. I did not become a cynical man after this. I became a careful one. I learned to treat my financial life like the system it is. I learned to set permissions like boundaries. And I learned one painful truth I wish I had understood earlier. A home is not protected only by locks and alarms. A home is protected by the honesty of the people inside it. END